Welcome to another practice session. We've been looking at the movement of the hips, and I would like to start with the 18 therapies. So if you've done them with us before, they'll be familiar. If you haven't, just follow along. And I'm not going to give a lot of information about them. We're just going to go through them. So if you want a lot of information, there's another video that takes them apart in more detail than we probably will ever do again. So go look at that if you need more detail. I'll face you, Lee will face to give you his back, and we'll just run through them. So first one, turning the head side to side, left and right. And up and down. Bring in the arms. And up and down. And letting your eyeballs follow first your left hand, and then the right. Hands on the small of your back, coming up the center, under the armpits, back to back, palm to palm, down the center, opening over the dantian. Hands in the same position. This time you're going to free first the left and open toward it, and then the right. Fingers interlaced, coming up your center line, turning palm out, an oval with your head in it, and you're going to go to the upper left corner twice, reaching up, back to center, and reaching up again. And then we'll do it to the right. Opening both sides of the body. This one's a spiral, hands and fists. Left hand turns palm out. As it extends forward, the rest of the body spirals to the right, including the head and your eyes. None of these moves are held, just move through them. gently and easily. A little wider than shoulder width. Put your hands on your hips so that you can feel them. This is rotating on your hip sockets. So the head is going to stay in place. Start with your hips to the back, and you're going to turn, make a big rotation 4 times around to the left. Keeping your body pretty stable so that it's just the hips that are moving. And then around to the right. Your center only moves enough to keep your balance. All the action is in your hips. Bend your knees to stand up. Back to regular old shoulder width. And hands come up, open to the sides, shoulders, elbows, hands. Turn palm down, fold over, and hang down toward the ground. Bend your knees to stand up. Doesn't matter how low you go, it's about making the shapes, not about going to extremes. Always bending your knees to stand up through the body. Wider than shoulder width, hands and fists. You're going to sit to the right, turn to the left, open the right hand as you shift to the left, and come back. Other side. Feet close together. They don't have to be smashed together, just close. Gonna make another oval with your head in it and make a C shape down toward your feet. Doesn't matter how low you go. And bend your knees to stand back up. Same stance, hands resting lightly on your knees, and you're going to rotate the ankles. So keep your feet flat on the ground. You're going to squat, opening to the left, stand up as it comes around to the back. We'll do it 4 times in one direction, making sure your feet stay stable. This isn't about knees, it's about ankles. So your feet need to stay flat on the ground and not roll around. And then the other direction. And bend your knees to stand up. Wider than shoulder width. Hands on your hips. You're going to sit into your left leg and turn to the right, letting the left knee track the toes as you turn the hips. Back to keeping the feet close together. Hands lightly on knees. Fold yourself up, bend your knees, hang over, hang your arms down, and stand up away from your arms, and then come up the rest of the way. Again, how far you go is not important. Just squat, fold over, stand up, and come up the rest of the way. Okay, and this one, feet wider than shoulder width, hands lightly resting on opposite knees. You're going to squat, free the left hand, and follow it up to the side. You can stand up when you bring your hands back down, squat as your hand goes up, following the motion with your head and opening toward it. And bend your knees to stand up. Okay, just a couple more. This one might want to take a step back so that you can come forward. Step forward with the left leg, hands come up, head comes up, head gets level, hands come down, feeling the walls of the room. Right knee comes up, hug it, let it back down, hands go up with the head, level your head, and come back. Okay, and the last one is the hero stroll. So give yourself another little bit of space because we're going to walk forward. Hands on hips. Step forward, sit down, coming up the front leg, peeling away from the rear leg, into the rear leg, peeling away from the front leg. Back into the front leg, and step. Not pushing off the back foot or off the front heel. You're just going up and down the leg that the weight goes into. And last one. And just step 50-50. All right, so that's the 18 therapies. I like to wake up the body with them. And specifically, there's some really useful ones for looking at the hip joints, because remember, that's what we're doing again today, is looking at how the hip joints work. So one of the really nice things about the 18 Therapies is that it has some really nice work for your hip joints. So let's look again at a few of those. So the first one I want to look at is the hip rotations. So you feel your hip joints here, so your thumbs are on the inside, and you want to make sure that the rotation happens right on your hip joints. It's not this sort of a thing where I'm waving my upper body around. The upper body stays mostly in place, and what happens is that the hips are going to rotate around, and that makes there be a little bit of change in the head and torso so that you keep your balance, but not fundamentally about the head and the torso. So feel yourself round. We're going to do this several times, not just the 4 and 4, because I want you to get into it a little bit. Feel the roundness of your hip joints. Body's making a big circle. Notice if there's a tendency to square off and just make there be edges. You want the fullest extent, front, circling, circling, and circling. And we'll do it one more time in this direction. Stop in the back. And now we'll go the other way. Really feeling the roundness, noticing any place that you want to square off the edges, and see what you can do to make it be round. You're really rotating on the hip joint. Feel a sense of roundness. Notice where you lose the roundness. There's information there. Really grease those hip joints. And we'll do one more. Stopping in the back. Bend your knees to stand up. So that's a really good way to practice feeling your hip joints. One of the things that you might notice, and I'm going to have you do it again in a second, now that you got the technique, is that as you go around, one is opening and one is closing, and they kind of change. So you want to feel, that's what the thumbs here is about. Feel the changing of the two hip joints. You're rotating on top of each of them, but there's a little bit of a change. So let's do it just a couple times in each direction so that you pay attention to feeling how those hip joints are changing as you go around. Really feel. Stick your thumb in there so that you have awareness. And then at the back, stop, and we'll go the other direction. Feel the changing. And we'll just do it once more. And always bend your knees to stand up so that you don't lever your body from your lower back. The next one I want to take a look at is this one that we call Funky 70-30s. So you start with your feet wider than shoulder width. Doesn't need to be a big spread, but you want enough space. The thing about this one is that let me just describe this once, and Lee can do it with me. As you sit down into one leg and turn, you want to be on top of this hip joint, and as you shift, there's a rotation on top of both hip joints. You're coming into the front leg and turning the whole torso so that it rotates on top of both the front and the back leg. So let's do this together. Sitting into one leg and then shifting. Don't just shift on a track. Feel the roundness. And that you don't turn. Right. You do not turn the back foot as this goes. That's part of what gives you that rotation, is that you leave that back foot there. So the back foot is stable. You shift into the front foot. Let it have a rotation, leaving the back foot straight. And we'll do this another couple times, just so you really get the feel for it. I think this one is really interesting to see how, as you shift forward, everything has this rotation going on, the back leg as well as the front. If you turn in your back foot, you'll lose that rotation. And just one more round. Feeling that sense of moving on top of your hip joints. Great. And then the last one I want to take a look at is also a little wider than shoulder width. This is the one where you sit down into one leg and open toward the emptying leg. So one important thing is that the knee stays with the foot, as opposed to falling in when you turn. So as you sit down right on top of your full leg, and then let the whole torso rotate. It's rotating on top of both hip joints. You're moving away from the leg that you're standing on and turning here, not here. And then come back. Make sure your feet are straight, pointing straight ahead. Sit down into the other leg and turn. Doesn't matter how far you turn. What matters is that you turn the torso on top of your hips. So this is a really nice one for getting that sense of moving away from one leg and turning into the other leg. Let's do another round or two of this, really getting that feeling. It'll grease those hip joints nicely. Okay. Did I do an even number? I'm not even sure. I lost track. So I wanted to do all this so that you wake up your hip joints, wake up your whole body, and especially wake up your hip joints, get some focus on them, because what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Lee, and he's going to do some work that requires that we have open hip joints. So now you do.
Okay, let's keep going. The rooted in the feet, released in the legs, directed by the waist, expressed in the hands. The directed by the waist is this whole area. I mean, specifically the yao is this lower back kidney area. But it really encompasses the whole center of the body, the dantian, the two hip joints, and the lower back. So when we're talking about the waist, we're talking about all of that. And that's part of why the hip joints are so important in this. They're the critical part in it. Sometimes people see people trying to distinguish between turning from the waist, and turning from the hip joints. And the thing is, the vertebra at the base of the spine have little blocks on them, so they really can't turn very much. Obviously, at the top of your spine, your neck, it turns a lot. And in between, in the whole torso area, you can turn some, but the base of the spine really does not let you turn. And so there's a real tendency to misplace where we're thinking about and think that I'm turning from down here, but actually what I'm doing is twisting the top of the spine. So be careful with that. Part of why we pay so much attention to the rectangle, shoulders over hips, nose over belly button, so you have this rectangle of hips and shoulders and you don't distort that, is because there's a real tendency to think we're moving the waist, we're moving the hips, when actually what we're doing is twisting the upper spine. So keeping the rectangle, keeping the shoulders carefully aligned with the hips, left shoulder over the left hip, right shoulder over the right hip, keeps me from twisting, because when I twist, now my right shoulder is no longer over my right hip, and neither was my left shoulder. And then the nose over belly button is just part of that too, because for some reason there's a tendency to think we're turning further than we are, because I can see over there. So my dantian must be pointed that way, right? I can see over there. So my dantian must be pointed that way. And so we get caught in our upper bodies and our heads rather than in our waists and our hips. And this is obvious in some of the things that Beth worked on, like the rotating of the hips, right? So, put your hands on your hips and rotate your hips around. And what you'll see often is, oh yeah, my hips are rotating, but what I'm doing is moving the upper body. So we really want you to be aware of the hips as a driver and a platform for the motion. And don't let the confusion of the upper body twisting take you away from knowing where the hips are. Now, the 18 therapies that we just did, some of those, that's not Tai Chi Chuan, the form. So it doesn't always follow the rules of the form. And so like this funky 70-30 one that we did, as you sit here and go through this, my hips are only going to get to about there, right? Because my feet are at 90 degrees. I can't actually get my hips square to where my front foot is because my feet are at 90 degrees. So then you go ahead and you let the upper body turn. So this is a place where you can get a twist. And so I'll feel that spiral running through the upper body all the way through to the head. Now, I want that to be integrated through the whole body. I don't want it to just be the head. I don't want to go like this. I want it to be through the whole body as it goes out there. So the 18 therapies are nice because they let us work that stuff. But we're really trying to focus on the motion of the hips. And so what I want to do is look at it in the kicks, because there's a lot going on there, and it's difficult. So let's run through it from single whip up through separate right foot, separate left foot. We won't do the spin and turn and strike with heel, but we'll do the other pieces up through there. So from single whip, and just run through it once. Just go ahead. Squatting down. Golden pheasant stands on left leg and right leg. Unnamed posture number 1. Separate right foot and separate left foot. Great. So now we've been working on this second class in a row, this opening and closing of the hip joints. Let's look at that last 18 therapy that Beth did, where the feet are wider than shoulder wide. You sit into one leg and you turn towards the other leg. And then you come back, you sit into one leg and you turn towards the other leg. So this one has that nice feature that's in Tai Chi form where the two hip joints are out of phase with each other. So as I sit into the left leg, my left hip joint is opening and I'm turning towards the right leg. The right hip joint is closing. There's a tendency when people do this to rotate the empty foot so that they don't have to close that hip joint. But so one hip joint is opening, one hip joint is closing. And same thing on the other side. One hip joint is opening, you're moving away from the foot, the other hip joint is closing. So the mistakes are that you rotate the foot so that this hip joint doesn't have to change, or that you let the knee fall in of the leg you're standing on so that the full hip joint doesn't have to change. So make sure the knee goes towards the toe, so your pelvis is moving away from the thigh, and you're moving towards the other thigh, closing that hip joint. So just do that a couple times. I'm not counting, but I want you to really feel one opening, one closing. One opening, one closing. This time the opening is the active one, and the closing is the result. It's the responsive, passive change. So we've talked about that closing is not always active. Opening is not always passive. So you've got that feeling for what opening and closing of the hip joints is. Let's do the kick section again. And I want you all the way through there to pay careful attention to the feeling of opening and closing. Now, mostly what we've been doing in the opening and closing is we've been doing it on the horizontal plane, right? So if I'm doing the bear, I close the hip joint of the leg that's drawing me towards it, and I let the other one open. So that's on the horizontal plane. The hips, one of the beautiful things about them is that they move both horizontally and also vertically. And so you've got two dimensions that you can work open and close in. Definition is the same. When I do golden pheasant and I pick my thigh up, this hip joint of the leg that's being picked up is closing because the thigh and the pelvis are coming towards each other. When I put the leg down, it's opening. All right, so I've got two dimensions, a horizontal turn and a vertical turn. As I stand in golden pheasant, I start out sitting down, so the leg I'm standing on, the hip joint has some close in it, and as I do golden pheasant, I stand up a little bit, letting that leg open. So let's do that section of the kicks again. We'll do it not in a hurry. I won't talk much, but I want you to really pay attention to your hip joints and look at the way that when one is opening, the other is closing. When one is closing, the other is opening. So from single whip. And go ahead, squatting down, watching the hip joints. Watching the hip joints. Watch what happens as the hip joints, as you drop the hand and turn. Kick. And kick. So we've done this for separating, and so let me review it briefly, which is you stand on one foot with the foot towards the corner, put your other foot out in front of you. What we're going to do is separate the weight and float that front foot. Start out with your waist facing the same direction as the back foot. And what you're going to do is turn towards the front foot. As you do that, let the front of the front hip joint feel like it's coming in, and let that lift the leg. And then turn back to the corner, let the leg go back down to the ground. Turn towards the front foot, letting the front hip joint come in, let that lift the leg. And once more. The turning rebalances the body and empties the weight from that leg. Do it on the other side. Waist starts out facing to the corner along with your back foot. Sink and turn towards the front leg, letting the front of the hip joint come in, letting that separate the foot, and come back. Do it again. Sink, turn towards the front leg, bending the hip joint, letting that float the foot. And once more. The turning causes the body to rebalance, which is floats the foot. So this is different from picking your foot up. I can be here and I can lift the leg, and when I do that, just go ahead and try that. When you do that, you'll feel a contraction all through the leg. Or you can change your shape such that the leg floats. And when I change the shape that way, I'm turning, the front of the hip joint is coming in. This hip joint, I'm turning away from that leg, is opening. The hip joint of the empty leg is closing. And I let that play out through the foot and lift the foot. So this happens all through the kicks. We did a whole series on the kicks, so you can look at that for technical details. But the kicks tend to have two parts. That doesn't mean kick, only turn and strike with heel has that. But the two parts of the kicks are, one, where you sink and turn towards the leg that's going to kick in order to get it floated, and then two, when you actually kick. So as we do this, watch for those two parts. And let me show them to you in the golden pheasants, and then we'll run through that whole thing again. So I've just come out of squatting down. My waist is towards the front corner where my top hand is. The first thing I do is sink and come back towards the front, turning towards my empty leg. That brings the leg in and separates it. And then I let a rebound come from the ground up. Then I drop that foot. That'll turn my waist slightly to the corner. I'm exaggerating. As I shift into it, my waist is quite a bit towards the corner. And now I turn back towards the front foot, letting the leg come in, floating, just like that exercise we just did. That's the part one. And then part two is come up into the kick. So you've got part one, freeing the foot. Part two, kicking. Part 0, getting ready to do it. I'm facing the corner. Part 1, freeing the foot. Part 2, kicking. So that's true in the separates too. I turn and swing. And I've got part 1, which is turning towards the leg, closing the hip joint of the about to kick foot. And then part 2, which actually kicks it. So let's do that again. I want you to really watch that opening and closing in the legs. And go ahead, squatting down. Okay, so the waist is towards the left front corner. Release, turn back square, and let your rear leg really get free, and then knee kick. Put the right foot down. As you do that, that'll open you slightly to the right corner. Shift, really feel yourself facing the right corner. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I've turned a full 45. You'll probably turn just a little bit like Beth did. Now you can turn back towards the front, which frees your left leg, and then you kick. Continuing. High pat on horse. Drop the hands, turn back. So I'm facing the corner now. When my hands cross, I sink, open the hands, and I turn towards my right foot that's about to kick. That frees it from the ground. And then I kick. Bring everything in, step, second unnamed posture. Drop the hands to the corner, past the corner, back to the corner. So you're facing the right front corner now. Sink, open the hands, turn towards your left leg. That frees it. Now you can kick. And take a break. So things that happen to us are we're so concerned about the kick that we don't get everything set up right for that. So we're really trying to get this kick to work, and so we're all in that, and it takes us off of the ground. So really do the work to get that foot empty and ready to kick, and then however far you kick is how far you kick. How high your leg comes, what you do, that's not the goal. Sure, for perfection of form, and you're recording a form for the ages, you'd like your legs to be, just exactly right. But for your everyday practice, the important thing is being able to free the leg and then do something. And so if when I'm doing the kicks, I've come up and I drop down here, I free the leg so that the leg's actually off the ground and I'm all balanced, and then I can do even a little bit, that is great. That's way better than not having freed the leg, throwing my leg up and losing my balance. I'm in an attempt to actually get the kick. So be real clear that you free the leg, so the leg's actually free, and then you kick, and even if all you kick is just a little bit, you did it. You freed the leg, you kicked. Way better than striving for the external rather than having the situation set up so that you can make this happen correctly. So free the leg, then kick. Let's do it again. Squatting down. Feeling those hip joints. Notice how open the left is, and as you turn towards it, the left closes. You're facing the left front corner. Release, turn back towards the front, and use that to free your right leg. Now kick. If you just kick 2 inches, great. Put the right foot down. Notice how that opens your waist slightly to the right. As you shift, the waist is still slightly to the right. Now turn back to the front, use that to free your left leg, and then kick. If all you kick is 2 inches, great. Drop the left leg. Continue. Unnamed posture number 1. Check it out right here. The left hip joint is open. You've turned towards the right, so the right has closed. Now drop the hands, closing the left, moving away from the right, brings the right foot along. Come back to the corner, cross hands. Make sure you're in the corner. You haven't already turned back to the front, because that turn from the corner to the front is what's going to free your right leg. Sink, open the hands, free the right leg. Now the right leg is ready, and you can kick, if all you do is kick 2 inches, no problem. Bring the right foot in and step. Unnamed posture number 2. Continue. Back to the corner, not the front, the corner. Sink, drop the elbows, hands separate, turn to the front, and now your left leg is freed so that you can kick. And again, if all you do is kick 2 inches, great. So Maggie would make this gesture for us for the kicks, where you rotate and bring your elbow in, and then you open your fingers and extend. This bringing the elbow in, so the elbow mirrors what the hips do, and then the hand mirrors what the foot does. So do this with me. We'll do it on both sides. So start out on your left leg. Bring your right elbow in towards your hips, and see how that rotates the forearm, and it should cause the right leg to become free. So just undo that. I'm starting out here in the corner. I've got a little weight in my right leg. As I turn towards the right, the elbow comes in, my forearm rotates, the leg is free, and then the kick is I extend out to my fingers and my toe. So do that again. The arm mirrors the shape that the leg's making. Of course, we don't do this. This isn't how the forearm works, right? But you're using your arms to help you understand what's happening here in the legs and waist. So the elbow comes in, the forearm is rotating, the leg is free, your awareness extends out to your toes and your fingers. Once more on that side. Elbow comes in, forearm rotating, leg is free, extend. So that's the 2 parts of the kick, right? Freeing and then actually kicking. So do it on the other side. Now it's the left elbow that mirrors the left hip. You turn to the left, the elbow comes in, the forearm rotates, the leg is free. You extend out to your fingertips and your toe. Again, the elbow comes in, the forearm rotates, the leg is free. You extend. And once more. The elbow comes in, the forearm rotates, the leg is free. You extend out to your toes. So the thing about these little hand gestures is we've got most of us pretty good control over our hands. So you can make them do the shapes that you want. And the hand gestures are illustrative of what's happening in the hips. So when I do this, it's a real tendency to kick and not bring this hip in. And so then I'm just kind of lifting that whole leg. And so you can see what happened there. This hip hasn't come in at all. And then I'm lifting, and it's this real feeling of something heavy. The elbow tells me that this hip comes in closer to my center line, and then it extends out. So it doesn't have a feeling of up, lifting. It has a feeling of everything is in close, and now it goes out. So, play around with that yourself a little bit. So you've just come to cross hands, and don't bring the hip in, just lift the leg, right? And you feel that leg is heavy. Right? I can't do that very many times, it's difficult. The leg is heavy, and I'm hauling it up. Then, let the hip joint come in and extend out to your toes. Real different feeling. The motion is out, not up. The leg is light and separated, and then I go out to the toes. Do it on the other side. Don't bring the hip in, just lift the leg. Right? Feel how heavy that is. You're here, lift the leg. It's no wonder that people end up doing that. Now bring the hip in so the leg is light, and extend out to the toes. So it's out, not up. Again, bring it in, the leg is light, extend out to the toes. So how you think about this is really important. If you think I have to lift my leg, you're going to be lifting a heavy thing. They weigh a bunch, tens of pounds. They're heavy, so they're hard to lift. If you instead think, get the leg light and just go out, it's easy. So you want that out feeling, not hauling this big leg up. So let's do that section again and really try to find that in all of the kicks there. Single whip. Okay, turn back to the front to free your right leg, and now extend this time into the knee. Let the right leg come down, which opens you slightly to the right. Shift, you're still in the right. Turn back to the front, which frees the left leg, and now extend into the knee. Drop the foot, turn the waist. Go ahead, to the corner, past the corner, back to the corner. Sink, separate the hands. Bring the front hip joint in, which frees that leg. Extend out to the toes. And bring everything back and step. Continue to the corner, past the corner, back to the corner. Sink, bring the hip joint in, which frees the leg, and then extend out to the toes. Great. So, why do we spend so much time on the hip joints? Because they're right at the center of all this. Let's do a whole form. And I don't care if you make a mistake or fall over or something, I'm likely to do that. What I do want is that you're watching the way that the hip joints work and are part of every move, and you go ahead and you do this thing of freeing the leg so that it's easy to move it, whatever I'm doing. Single whip, free the leg, then I can step, versus having the leg be all heavy as something I have to haul out there. Free the leg, step. Free the leg, step. And then closing and opening. So we'll go through a whole form. I may say something, I may not. We will not do this agonizingly. So we're going to keep moving. And what that means is sometimes something will go by and you won't get it. And that's okay. Just file that away. for your own practice to come back and revisit that. And don't stay attached to, oh God, I've screwed that one up. When am I ever going to do anything more? Oh, right, here I am in the next move, right? So if you make a mistake, don't get caught on it. Just let it go. Just let it go. And keep going, because you've still got more opportunities to really feel your hip joints. From the top. And go ahead, nice and easy. Watch the hip joints in action here. Looks like the hands are moving a lot. Every motion in the hands is directed by, caused by, change in the hips. Free that leg before you step. Free the front leg, then you can step. Front hip joint closes, rear hip joint opens. Lots of change in the hip joints. Free the leg. Now watch the hip joints as we go into fist under elbow. Lots of change here. Flying diagonal. Free that leg. Hip joints all through cloud of hands. One is closing, one is opening. And we'll step this time. Free the leg and then kick. Free the leg, then kick. Watching through four corners here. There's a lot of action with the interchange of opening and closing. towards the left corner. Free the rear leg. Then step forward. Stand here for a second. Let any tension melt off of you. Rear crown of the head suspended. Mind resting in the dantian. Feeling the ground beneath your feet. And close it up. Great. So the opening and closing of the hip joints is all through the form, all through this. So pay attention to it, work on the drills we've given you, and enjoy the interchange of opening and closing.